Well, good morning to all of you on this Labor Day weekend and everyone joining us by way of YouTube and Channel 12. And a shout out to all of you in Asheville, Florida. I see lots of familiar names and faces on YouTube this morning, so welcome. Glad all of you are here, and I hope you spend some time today and get a little rest and calm down, back up a little bit. You know, I've been thinking about this day, Labor Day. It's interesting to me that the church actually is celebrating a secular holiday. Now, we can do another group of lessons for this day, but the church, the Episcopal Church, the Anglican Communion, there are millions of us around the world, stopped to think about Labor Day. And in our country, we have a prayer for it, and you heard it earlier, to actually think about what this day means. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. And I know you come from lots of places, you're going to go do a lot of things, you're preoccupied with those things, but I'm going to try to get you back this way a bit, to really think about Labor Day for yourself. And I was thinking about this 2 or 3 weeks ago. I've been I don't know why, I started reading, doing research about it. Something just captured me this year. And instantly a story came to me that is with me always. The story is 47 years old. And it's a tiny little story, and when I tell it, you'll catch why it's a tiny little story. But it means a lot to me, and I'm wondering if you've had an event like that, something tiny that ends up being very informative. So I'll take you back. I was 47, 48 years ago, I was starting seminary. In seminary, there were a bunch of us who had been out in the world working. And so we were back in school, and was it fun? I tell you, compared to getting up, spending all night with Wonder Bread and Hostess Cake and IT&T International, this was a cakewalk. And we'd play. I won't tell that part of it. We worked hard too. We studied, but we had a good time together. And there were a bunch of us, and we lived together in a dorm. And we were all adults. It was kind of funny. And we had a lot of African students with us. And we prized them because they were all ordained. They were sent to the United States to improve their degrees, get graduate degrees, and they were all going back to Africa to run the church. So these were caliber people. Anyway, so a Sunday night, I'm sitting, like first semester, I'm sitting in my room. We always kept our doors open. We were in and out of each other's. We were like a dorm. We were like a bunch of young adults again. And I was in my dorm, and I was doing something, and I look up, and Ando is standing there. And Ando is one of my good friends. He was really short, about 5'7", one of the fastest, smartest people I've ever known. Literally could run a million miles an hour. He's a great athlete. He was from Ghana. And he had a family back home, and he was in the United States by himself studying. And he stood there, and I looked up at him, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I wanted to say, duh. I said, "Ando, what kind of stupid question is that? You see what I'm doing? I'm sewing a button on my shirt." He looks at me, doesn't move. He says, "I didn't mean what you're doing. Why are you doing that?" And then I stopped and looked at him, and I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "John, in my country, there is someone who has that job. You shouldn't be doing that." I said, "Ando, I have to do it." He said, "Well, in my country, you shouldn't do it, because if you do it, you take their job away. And everybody needs to work, and that's the way we work together. We all need each other." And with that, Ando went back to his room. 47 years ago, and I remember it like it was a minute ago, that clear. And you've had these too. Luckily, for some reason, I paid attention to it, and God helped me pay attention to it. You catch it? It was really something clicked. But I was shown something, I got a different perspective. It doesn't sound like much, but it planted something in me that's really deep and abiding, by the way. I grew up in a great family, really egalitarian, work hard people, valued people, but man, Ando showed me something else. It's as simple as this. Here's the principle that I realized I developed. And I hope I have an ethic that goes with that principle. Time will tell. History judges. My work effort will judge. The people around me will be the judges, frankly. It's always that way. I don't get to judge for myself. But all jobs matter, and all people in their jobs matter. Every job is important, notwithstanding one. This morning, young Maria, you may have met her, opened the place, had us all ready to go. She cleans up, sets up, makes it that the rest of us can do our work, everybody. Do you know what? Her job a lot of days is way more important than mine. And I know that. I know that. I know that in here. Ando planted that seed. And I can be a slave driver of myself and others. This crew will tell you, I'm a really hard worker. That's not a virtue, by the way. But also step back, and I know the proportions. Everybody matters. Their work matters. It's important. And this is Labor Day, by the way. Labor Day weekend. A secular holiday, and we pause to celebrate something. What is it? Point towards something, make holy something. Well, listen to the collect. If you didn't hear it, because I know you're trying to get settled, slow down. I'm not putting you down, I mean this. I know it takes a little bit of time to slow down. When I'm worshiping, not working, it takes me a little time to slow that rabbit wheel. That hamster wheel down, that little rabbit hole I'm jumping in. But go back and read the collect. The collect is really addressing something deep. The church is asking us to look at something as work that's work for the common good, something larger than just our jobs. It asks us to attend to the welfare of all workers, a concern for those who don't work. You see, obviously there's a spiritual dimension to this, or the church wouldn't do it. We're in the spiritual business. I'm not trying to fix labor relations. We do people. Churches do people. Work is necessary, by the way. Everybody needs to work. I know that. I believe that, by the way, because work gives meaning to life. It gives contribution to the whole. You don't get to sit on the sideline. So whatever that job is, and you get to identify what the work is. It's not just necessarily for pay. We know that. Work is terribly important. It's a rule of life. You see, I know that right now I'm at a slippery slope that's really unpleasant for you, because I'm about to get under your nerves, or in your nerves, because I've been on mine. You see, this conversation touches a deep place in us about work in America and our attitude toward it. I did a little research. I'm ahead of you. I've been thinking about this for 2 or 3 weeks. And if you want to refute it, if you want to disagree, go ahead, try, because you're not going to be able to. Americans and Japanese outwork everybody on the planet. No, let's put it this way. We work more than everybody on the planet, period, by a lot. Now, I also want to say what my son Hudson would say quickly. Dad, you're a first world person. You're talking about a first world problem, and I want to acknowledge that. There are people barely making it, barely eating, barely surviving. Do not go there. If you want to do that, we'll do that next week. Chris can do that with you. We'll talk about that. I'm talking to you. We're Americans. We're right here. I'm talking about our culture, our society. And our society, work is king and queen. We work. And we all know every metric proves it. At some point, what's your point? At some point, I'm going to ask you again, what is it at your point, personally, is it that overworking becomes an inverse proportion to productivity and to living, to being alive? A little serious, sorry. The church asks us to be a little serious today. I guess we have it in our DNA. I've tried to figure out where I get this drivenness about work. Some of it is psychodynamically my own stuff, like yours is. But I'll tell you, there are a bunch of you like me sitting right here. A ton of you. Most of you, by the way. It's just all around us. The way I know some of this is generational, too, is I spend a lot of time, and by the way, this is a conversation. We may discover a sermon in it. That was funny. This is not funny. Yeah, I'm not so funny sometimes. I talk to young people, and so I know the attitudes are different. Chris tells me working with the younger adults, maybe I ought to spend more time with younger people. I have them around me all the time, is I know younger people are hoping for a little something different. Old people may project onto them. They don't work as hard, all this kind of stuff. Some of you young people feel that. I wish there were more here could talk back to me. This is a talk back session, a think together session. I get that. Yeah, some people do need to work harder. I promise you, a bunch of people need to figure out why they're working all the time. All right, so let me do something fun. Ready for something fun? A little lighter? This is a real thing they did. Some psychologists who are on this all the time, you know why? Because you all sit in front of them talking about your work. It's not an accident. They're not making this up for themselves. So they decided to do something fun, and they went to a dating service. How many of you have used a dating service? No, don't raise your hand. I don't want to know. Do not tell. Do not raise your hand. Put your hand down. They went to a dating service, and they decided to do a little experiment. They came up with 2 profiles. Everything would be parallel except this one thing. Person A said this about himself, herself. The gender didn't matter, by the way. So if you think it's just as a guy thing, it's an everybody thing. Here's how they describe themselves in one way. I am employed but not overworked, creative and busy with my inner life and my non-work pursuits. Person B. I am hardworking and working hard and exhausted a lot of the time and tired. Then they ask everybody who does this service, which one do you think? Who'd they pick? Just don't sit there. Help me here. Who did they pick? They picked B by tons. Tell us not in our DNA. I'm worn out and tired all the time. Oh, I think that'd be a perfect date. Thanks. I don't mean it to be quite so serious, but you get it. And thank you for listening and talking and thinking. I want you to think. I think there's a lot at stake here. It's interesting. Nothing wrong with hard work. Don't get me wrong. I think you have to work hard sometimes. I've had days, how many of you have had days that just was endless? 7, 8, 10, 12, 20, 30. You own businesses, you do stuff, you do surgery, you have kids. Whatever the work is, sometimes it's endless. But there is a pause, I hope, in us, a human pause that says, whoa, let's find a little balance. And I'm not doing some kind of social liberal crazy thing that we're going to dismantle the labor world or something. I don't know how to do that. That's not this conversation. I'm not even joking. That's not what I'm talking about. I think we have the best economic system in the world. I love free enterprise. I think it's given so much to the world and will continue to do. But every system has unintended consequences. Some of you don't remember this. I remember sitting, being bored out of my mind when I was 8 on my grandparents' porch with the extended family on a Sunday, and there's nothing but crickets and rocking chairs making noise. I wanted to go crazy. Some of y'all know that story. I'd have it back in. I miss it. I didn't know what I was missing, did I? And we didn't. So all systems need to reset. How do you reset? Don't know. But I know one thing, that Labor Day weekend, by the way, has the word weekend in it. It also has a Sabbath in it. That's what you're doing. And that's not a new thing, although kind of relatively new. Industrial revolution came along. And then in 1884, did you know this? It was 1884 that people started talking about an 8-hour day. First time it had ever been mentioned. 1884. Well, we're not 200 years, but It's the age of this congregation. As long as this congregation's been around, we've been talking about this and trying to figure it out. Again, I'll say it. I know your head is saying it. Shut up. Some people need to work harder. They're not working hard enough. You're saying it. Okay, I hear you. I want you to hear me and hear the voice in our society. Look around at the society. You know, again, this goes way back for us. This is deep in our spiritual heritage. It goes back thousands of years. It goes to the book of Exodus. You ever heard of that? It goes to Pharaoh and the Israelites. And the Israelites had ended up in Egypt. And Pharaoh was working them to death. They never had a day off. He was killing them, building his stuff. They were always building something. Israelites had to do it. Under harsh conditions, we'll let that off, but it's the real deal. And guess who intervenes? God Almighty Himself, herself, intervenes. The God of the universe, Yahweh, intervenes and says, no more of this. My people need a day of rest. And that's where the Sabbath came into the Jewish tradition. Thousands of years ago, a day to stop, the opposite of work. And playing and resting is important and at the center. But don't miss, there's also that other little component. We're here as a spiritual conversation. That the Sabbath is not, I don't mind going riding my bike and playing, and Jerry and I will hit a little bad golf today. But there's another piece of the Sabbath. Here, later, whenever, included, whatever you do, is to reacquaint yourself with a little prayer. A little slow down to think. A little spiritual time to re-identify oneself. That's the Jewish tradition, to get back in touch with who you are. That's why they bothered to do it, by the way. It's not checking a box. So please don't come to church and quit checking boxes. Do that. If you do that, you'll start breaking the cycle. You're here for something deeper, and I am too. Everything you do about your spirituality is a deeper journey. And Sabbath is part of that. A day to rest, a day to pray, a day to reclaim one's identity. I think we need to start a new Sabbath movement for our culture. Not to make everybody Christian, not to proselyte them into Judaism, but to give a gift that we know about. I give you a test. How many of you who are working a lot, how many of you who are parents or grandparents and have charge and interface with young people working a lot, lots of you are retired, working less, I get all that. Ask some people that work a lot, and ask them on Sunday night if they're ready for Monday, if they're rested and ready for Monday. Do you ever hear that? I never hear it. Never. I see people literally trying to pour down some more Starbucks to make it through. You see, Sunday is about rejuvenating. And I have gone to preaching. I am preaching now. It's about rejuvenating, replenishing, recharging, regrounding ourselves in ourselves. It's that simple. Remembering who you are. So begin to give yourself the gift of Sabbath. And it doesn't have to be Sunday. I get that. We're a 24/7, 7/7, forever and ever, 365 world. And I'll tell you right now, I want to do a shout out to the people at UT Hospital that I may need later today when I crash my bike or something. They're working, so I get to do what I'm doing. The police are watching over. There are plenty of people, so it's not tied to Sunday. Don't hear that. That's not what I'm saying. But if you got Sunday, Sunday wouldn't be bad. Remembering who we are. I know the ship has sailed. I know I probably wasted 10 minutes of your time and mine, but I'm not going to give up. Because I think we need to stop and slow down. The refrain I hear is, I am so busy. I am so tired. I cannot stop. Give yourself a Sabbath. Let's start a Sabbath movement Invite some people into your Sabbath. Take a Sabbath yourself. Maybe we ought to say, come back to the Sabbath. Come on back. We're still here. We may be small, but there are a whole bunch of us doing it around the world. Come on back. And I promise you will find what Judaism taught us thousands of years. You will find yourself. And you'll find God. Amen.